1869, 10 men in 4 boats set out to explore the last unknown territory in America. A one-armed Civil War major, John Wesley Powell, leads the first river adventure down the Colorado River, through the Grand Canyon. He is determined to make his mark as a scientist and explorer, and will risk the lives of 9 men to do it. 3 months later, only 6 men and 2 boats emerge on the other side. Their epic journey begins as a scientific quest and ends as a struggle for survival. May 1869. A university professor from Illinois heads west. His destination is Green River Settlement, Wyoming. John Wesley Powell is a restless veteran of the Civil War, seeking rebirth as a scientist and explorer.
Walker, I want you to meet the mayor. So good to see you, Major. Good to see you.
Powell's mission is to lead a river expedition into the unknown, down the Colorado River to the Grand Canyon. Powell and his brother Walter meet the 8 men he has assembled for his quest. Most are Easterners like Powell. Some are also war veterans. Most have no experience with rivers and boats.
O.T. Howland, how you doing?
Glad to meet you, sir.
Hawkins, glad to have you with us.
Well done.
Let's get loaded here and get on downstream.
Each man has agreed to come without pay. Powell has a meager $2,000 for the whole journey.
Come on, man, let's get these boats loaded. The Major wants to leave on time.
4 years have passed since the Civil War's end. A wounded America is healing. The West offers these men a new beginning. To carry them, Powell has brought 4 stout boats of his own design, with enough room to carry supplies for 300 days. His goal is to map unexplored areas of the river and to produce the first geological study of the surrounding canyons. Powell christens his boat the Emma Dean in honor of his beloved wife. The other men christen the next 2 boats, Maid of the Canyon and Kitty Clyde's sister. They call the last No Name.
Men ready to go? We've got a long journey here.
They set off on a calm May morning, 10 men certain of nothing but their own freedom.
We raise our little flag, push the boats from shore, and the swift current carries us down. John Wesley Powell.
is a cavalier beginning to an odyssey that will test the courage of them all. A voyage that reaches its climax in the Grand Canyon. It takes courage to lead such a journey, bravery born of pain in a savage war. John Wesley Powell's saga begins in 1862 in the bloodiest war in American history. The Civil War pits Union forces of the North against Confederate forces of the South. On April 6, the 28-year-old schoolteacher Powell leads a Union division in the Battle of Shiloh in Tennessee. He raises his arm to give the signal to fire. His arm is shattered by a Confederate bullet. The next day, the arm is crudely amputated at the elbow. Powell will suffer agonizing pain for the rest of his life in the stump where his right arm once was. Wounded but not defeated, he returns to the battlefield and is promoted to major. The war ends, leaving a nation of scarred men. John Wesley Powell is among them. He goes west. Powell seeks solace in nature. In 1867, he launches a career as a leader of scientific expeditions. He is a self-taught geologist and sees a way to make a name for himself in a land few others have explored. The wounded Powell discovers that the West's wild beauty offers him the chance for a new life after the war.
When he who has been chained by wounds to a hospital cot until the groans of those who lie about tortured with probe and knife are piled up, when he at last goes out into the open field, what a world he sees. John Wesley Powell.
On an expedition in Colorado Territory, Powell is joined by another Civil War veteran who suggests a plan that could make both men famous. A voyage down the mysterious Colorado River. His name is Jack Sumner, a 27-year-old farmer from Iowa, another runaway to the wide-open West. Sumner will forever claim that running the Colorado River was his idea.
What do you have in mind there? Let's take a look at it over here.
The Major wanted me to go with him the following summer to the Badlands of Dakota on a geological trip.
Okay. This is a map
I declined and fired back at him the counter proposition,
called the Unexplored.
the exploration of the Colorado River of the West.
Oh, that's totally unknown. No one's been down that area. You think we can make that?
He at first scouted the idea as foolhardy and impossible.
Down south, but nobody's been through there. There's a number of these side rivers, like we know what the San Juan is. But
After several windy fights around the campfire, I outwinded him.
yeah,
Jack Sumner.
Sumner's proposed destination is the last unmapped area in the continental United States, 500 miles long and 200 miles wide. The Green and Grand Rivers flow south and become the Colorado River, but where they meet, no one knows. Through Utah, down to Arizona, runs an uncharted stretch of the Colorado River. Indians and Mormon settlers dot the surrounding areas, but the course of the river itself is the continent's last great riddle. Ahead of them, uncharted rapids may be around every bend. Powell has no way of knowing the Colorado River's temperament as it surges towards the sea. He is willing to take the lives of 9 men in his hands in pursuit of the answer. But for now, the going is gentle. Wyoming's calm Green River gives them time to get acquainted with their heavy, awkward boats. The men have come west to escape discipline. Ironically, they are now being led into no man's land by a Civil War major whose authority is absolute. But the river itself is the more punishing master. It is pioneer country, where Indians and white settlers share an uneasy peace. But Powell approaches the Indians with respect. He has learned native languages and customs. He believes no harm will come to his men. Each evening, the men camp on the bank, a welcome rest after the hard days on the river. They carry flour, sugar, beans, dried apples, coffee, and salt pork. The men carry guns and fishing rods to supplement the monotonous diet. Powell keeps a journal and orders Jack Sumner to do the same. Powell wants the voyage documented in the name of science. His men fail to understand his desire to produce results on the river adventure. What Powell does not know is that one of the men, a Massachusetts Army sergeant named George Bradley, secretly keeps his own journal and documents growing discontent with the leader.
The major, as usual, has chosen the worst camping ground possible. If I had a dog that would lie where my bed is tonight, I would kill him and burn his collar and swear I never owned him. George Bradley.
Powell keeps his own secret. The major's brother, Captain Walter Powell, is a ticking time bomb. A year in a Confederate prison camp has left him psychotic. Walter Powell's dangerous temper will test the endurance of his men. From Green River Settlement to the Utah border, the boats averaged just 10 miles a day for the first week. Then the expedition enters an uncharted area. According to Indian legends, Water Heap, white water, is ahead. The legends prove true, reported by Jack Sumner.
The walls were getting lower and not so wrought, and the current gradually slackens till it almost ceases. We ran along on the still water with a vague feeling of trouble ahead for about 2 miles when, turning an abrupt corner, we came in sight of the first fall. Jack Sumner.
orders the boats unloaded and slowly let down the river on ropes. The men grumble about the hard work and would prefer to take their chances in the rapids, but Major Powell's word is law. If Powell is to succeed, he must not lose boats, supplies, or men to the river. They make it through this first test. The punishing pattern of exertion and exhaustion becomes routine.
Roll out! Roll out! Mom, pack up the gas.
Beginning at dawn with a shout from camp cook Billy Hawkins.
More coffee? That's good. That's good.
Our cook has been an ox driver, a bullwhacker on the plains, and he hasn't forgotten his old ways. His voice breaks in. Roll out! Roll out, bulls in the corral! Chain up the gaps! Roll out! John Wesley Powell.
In this uncharted territory, Powell's scientific work begins in earnest. He uses sensitive barometers to measure the height of the canyon walls, hoping to produce the first detailed topographical map of the area. But the river will try to obstruct his plans. Two weeks after leaving Green River Settlement on June 8, 1869, the expedition reaches the canyon of Lodore, named by 18-year-old boatman Andy Hall after a sinister poem he recalls. At Lodore, disaster strikes. The three men in a boat called No Name miss Powell's signal to pull to shore. Oramel Howland, Frank Goodman, and Bill Dunn make a harrowing descent through the furious rapids. Split in two on the rocks. The men barely escape with their lives. Powell's barometers are in a packet on the shattered boat. Without them, his scientific mission is doomed.
No sleep comes to me in all those dark hours. The barometers are lost. There is a possibility that they are in the cabin lodged against the rock, for that is where they were kept. But then, how to reach them? John Wesley Powell.
Jack Sumner senses that the incident ignites a grudge in Major Powell that will ultimately tear the group apart.
This wreck marked the beginning of many quarrels between Major Powell and O.G. Howland and Bill Dunn. Jack Sumner.
The next morning, Jack Sumner risks his life in an attempt to salvage supplies from the no-name. Combining luck and daring, he takes the Emma Dean out among the boulders where the no-name lies ruined. He returns with the Major's precious barometers, and with a keg of whiskey smuggled aboard by Ormel Howland. Powell forgives the indiscretion this time.
The professor was so much pleased about the recovery of his barometers that he looked as happy as a young girl with her first beau. Tried to say something to raise a laugh, but couldn't. After taking a good drink of whiskey all around, we concluded to spend the rest of the day as best suited. Jack Sumner.
The celebration is short-lived. The Canyon of Lador is a 30-mile rapid laced with sharp rocks. George Bradley records his fears and his discontent with Powell.
The rapid is still continuous and not improving. Where we are tonight, it roars and foams like a wild beast. It is none of my business, but if we fail, it will be want of judgment that will defeat it. And if we succeed, it will be dumb luck, not good judgment that will do it. George Bradley.
In camp, Powell exercises an officer's command. Cook Billy Hawkins serves him dinner, while the men fend for themselves. Powell's men came west to escape such authority, and they resent it on their arduous journey. After 10 days, the rapids of Lador are finally vanquished. As they leave the canyon, George Bradley records his relief.
It has been the worst so far, and I predict the worst we shall ever meet. George Bradley.
But Bradley cannot guess the fury of the river ahead. On June 28, 1869, they reached the Uinta Valley in Utah, 30 miles from an Indian trading post. Here, the men get their first chance to abandon Powell's expedition. Powell hikes out for supplies with 4 of the men. For the others, it is a time to decide whether to continue. At the outpost, Powell reads his own obituary. 2 different con men have claimed to be the sole survivor of the Powell expedition. A tale of terror to tell and sell. Powell fires off a dispatch to the Chicago Tribune, assuring the nation he is very much alive. He leaves a copy of his journal to be published, hoping for fame, though his journey has barely started. The men know this will be their last contact with civilization for at least 600 miles. But only one man decides to quit the expedition, Frank Goodman, who nearly drowned in the no-name. The other 8 decide to carry on with Powell. But Powell's return reinforces the anger of his men. The impoverished leader can afford only meager supplies for the remaining journey. Jack Sumner records his outrage.
Major Powell brought back a shirt tail full of supplies. It was a damned stingy, foolish scheme, as there were plenty of supplies to be had. To bring back such a meager mess for 9 to make a 1,000-mile voyage through an unknown canyon. Jack Sumner.
Sumner is right. Within days, the men will add the mounting threat of starvation to the pains of their journey. The expedition now sets off into an unexplored canyon. Powell will be the first to map it. No white man has ventured here before. He quickly discovers why. It is an arid, inhospitable wasteland of blazing rock.
The walls are almost without vegetation. A few dwarf bushes here and there clinging to the rocks. Ugly clumps like clubs beset with spines. We are minded to call this the Canyon of Desolation. John Wesley Powell.
The barren land fascinates Powell, and he takes George Bradley to study its geology. Then the one-armed Powell is trapped on a ridge, 800 feet from the bottom, unable to go up or down.
I can't reach, Bradley. Major!
He is out of reach and nearly out of strength.
Major! Hold on, Major!
At this instant, it occurs to Bradley to take off his drawers, which he does, and swings them down to me. I hug close to the rock, let go with my hand, and seize the dangling legs. John Wesley Powell.
Come on, Major!
Powell's quest for knowledge has nearly cost him his life. Each day brings new dangers.
A terrible gale of hot, dry winds swept our camp and roared through the canyon, mingling its sound with the hollow roar of the cataract, making music fit for the infernal regions. We needed only a few flashes of lightning to meet Milton's most vivid conceptions of hell. George Bradley.
The canyon has become their prison. Even if the men choose to abandon Powell, there is nowhere to go, no way out.
The hot blast would sweep through these rocky gorges, admonish us that a walk out to civilization is almost certain death. George Bradley.
The men fear Powell's scientific quest will kill them all, but carry on with grim determination. On the 7th week of their journey, Powell's boat, the Emma Dean, swamps and capsizes. The one-armed Powell cannot keep hold of the boat and swims for his life to shore. 1 barometer and 2 rifles are lost. Yet the Major continues his scientific quest, seeing magnificence where George Bradley sees nothing but terrible isolation.
The whole country is inconceivably desolate. Hardly a bird save for the ill-omened raven or an occasional eagle screaming over us. One feels a sense of loneliness as he looks on the little party. Only 3 boats and 9 men, hundreds of miles from civilization, bound on an errand the issue of which everybody declares must be disastrous. George Bradley.
Then on July 16, 1869, they arrive at the edge of the mysterious blank space on America's map. Powell and his party discover the junction of the Green, the Grand, and the Colorado rivers in Utah. Before their arrival, the junction could only be guessed within 100 miles. This discovery is one of the geographic mysteries Powell has come to solve. But he may not survive to bring his report home. Rations are running low, and they will soon starve to death.
The flour has been wet and dried so many times that it is all musty and full of hard lumps. We make a sieve of mosquito netting and run our flour through it, losing more than 200 pounds in the process. John Wesley Powell.
He allows himself just 4 days for scientific work, and then gives orders to move ahead. From now on, it is a race against time. July 21, 1869. The expedition surges into the unexplored Colorado River. The greatest discoveries lie ahead, but for Powell's men, survival outweighs science. The struggle through the furious rapids slows their escape. Over the next week, they progress just 25 miles, less than 4 miles a day. They all know that the next known settlement is 500 miles ahead. Fishing is fruitless in the churning mud of the Colorado, and the heat of the canyon is too extreme even for animals. Hunting parties return empty-handed and exhausted. Finally, the men have had it. Incited by the Major's unstable brother Walter, tempers erupt while Powell is off exploring. Guns are drawn in a tense standoff. Outnumbered, Walter Powell backs down. The incident brings the men within an inch of mutiny, and the journey is far from over. Powell is oblivious to the dark mood of the group. As they cross into uncharted Arizona territory, the landscape absorbs him. He is the first scientist to witness its wonder. They reach a breathtaking waterfall Powell names Vasey's Paradise after a botanist friend back home. Around every bend in the river, threatening rapids reveal unimaginable beauty. On August 13, 1869, they finally arrive at the treasure Powell has come to present as a gift to America, the Grand Canyon. They are the first white men to see it from the river. It has been more than 300 years since the Spanish, standing high atop the rim, declared the chasm impassable. The Spaniards named the river Colorado, meaning red. They stared in awe, but dared not navigate it. Now, 9 ragged men in 3 wooden boats face the Grand Canyon's mighty river. Each mile reveals a new marvel. They have stumbled upon one of the greatest natural wonders of the New World.
And now the scenery is on a grand scale. Great numbers of caves are hollowed out, so grand that architectural terms belittle them. John Wesley Powell.
Only Powell senses the majesty of the moment. For his men, Grand Canyon is a hopeless wasteland.
This part of the canyon is probably the worst hole in America, if not in the world. The gloomy black rocks drive all the spirit out of a man, and the excessive drenching and hard work drive all the strength out of him and leave him in a bad fix indeed. We had to move on or starve. Jack Sumner.
They descend into the heart of the canyon. The Colorado boils and surges. 33 rapids on the first day, and untold hundreds to run ahead. place to seek shelter from sudden deadly storms.
This evening we've had a terrible thunder shower. The rain poured down in torrents, and the thunder peals echoed through the canyon from crag to crag, making wild music for the lightning to dance to. George Bradley.
They pass through a landscape on a scale so monumental it defies simple description. The river tears the continent asunder, a roaring impasse between north and south. The north rim towers 8,000 feet, while the south rim soars more than a staggering mile high. For Powell, the geology of Grand Canyon can be read like a layer cake, over 1 billion years of the Earth's history in chronological order, from river to rim. Powell is mesmerized. He wants to stop and study the canyon, but his men are exhausted, starving, and at the brink of mutiny. They are down to their last sack of flour.
The men are uneasy and disoriented and anxious to move on. If Major does not do something soon, I fear the consequences. But he is contented and seems to think that the biscuits made of sour and musty flour and a few dried apples is ample to sustain a laboring man. George Bradley.
Powell's maps indicate they should have emerged from the river 50 miles ago. The desperate men now realize their leader has no idea when the Odyssey will end. They are lost. On August 27, 1869, the expedition encounters what all agree to be the worst rapid they have ever seen. They spend half a day studying it, trying to see a way down, but none can be found.
Sir, they want to hike out. They just want to out of us. I think we can get through here. Maybe we'll come down this right side. Just hang right along the ridge. Right along the shore. Get down around the corner. Away from the center.
Powell's authority has finally eroded. George Bradley senses rebellion among the men.
There is discontent in camp tonight, and I fear that some of the party will take to the mountains, but hope not. This is decidedly the darkest day of the trip, but I don't despair yet. I shall be one to try to run it, rather than take to the mountains. George Bradley.
What's on your mind here?
Bradley will stay, but for 3 others, obedience to Powell has reached the breaking point. Oramel Howland, his brother Seneca, and Bill Dunn decide to go no further in the boats. They will try to make a run for it by land. Powell's maps show a Mormon settlement 75 miles away. It will be a long, dangerous walk, but even longer on the meandering river. Powell must decide whether to let the men go or abort his expedition completely and join them.
For me, there is no sleep. It is a clear night, and I take out the sextant to make an observation. Is it wise to go on? But to leave the exploration unfinished is more than I am willing to acknowledge. and I determined to go on. John Wesley Powell.
At dawn, they agree to part. Each group believes the other is taking the greater risk. Mementos are passed. Even Powell is unsure he has made the right choice. Differences are pushed aside. By land or river, the odds of survival are slim. They separate as friends, all wishing the best of luck to one another. They name the place Separation Rapid. August 28, 1869, for those who have chosen the boats, there is no turning back. They muster all their remaining strength and courage. Survival depends on all they have learned in 3 months on the river. They emerge, triumphant. Powell signals to the deserters, hoping they will reconsider and rejoin him. His hopes are dashed. The Howland brothers and Dunn have made up their minds. They are better off without the Major and his quest. The river swings northwest and turns calm, its fury finally exhausted. Powell's victory is bittersweet. The deserters could not have guessed that their decision to leave came just before the Grand Canyon's final rapids.
It looks much wider now, doesn't it?
On August 30, 1869, a 1,000-mile, 99-day journey finally ends. Ahead is a sight which they welcome with dumb amazement. Men fishing. They have reached the other side. The Grand Canyon, after 2 billion years of silent majesty, has been unveiled. Powell's quest is fulfilled, but his conscience will not be eased until he knows the fate of the 3 men who left him. September 1, 1869. The 6 remaining men of the Powell expedition part ways, never to meet as a group again. With the worst rapids behind them, Sumner and Bradley float on to Yuma, while Hawkins and Hall reach Mexico and the mouth of the Colorado. After the river adventure, Walter Powell's condition worsens. Within a few years, he will be unable to work or even socialize with other people. The Powells journey over 400 miles to Salt Lake City, arriving September 15. There, Powell receives chilling news. Reports say that the Howlands and Dunn have been killed by Indians, while others claim it was white settlers who murdered the starving men. Once again, as Powell learned in war, sacrifice is the price of victory. The journey changes Powell's life. He returns east with his report of an unimaginable spectacle, the Grand Canyon, a marvel that he himself will continue to explore. Powell devotes the rest of his life to the Grand Canyon and its conservation as an American treasure. He is rewarded for his achievement, and before his death in 1902, the one-armed professor from Illinois becomes America's most powerful scientist. He leads in the expansion of the nation's most respected institutions, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Smithsonian, the National Geographic Society. John Wesley Powell leaves an eternal legacy of roaring water and silent stone, filling in a blank space on the map with a wonder of the natural world. Ever before us has been an unknown danger. Every waking hour in the Grand Canyon has been one of toil. Now, the danger is over. Now the gloom has disappeared. Our joy is almost ecstasy. John Wesley Powell.